Before our last home game before the World Cup against Chelsea, a bunch of Newcastle fans, known as NUFC Against Sportswashing, decided to stage a silent protest outside St.James Park against our Saudi ownership. Now, as someone who doesn't really agree with that protest, I wanted to find out a little bit more and put a couple of questions to them. And they're coming up, so stick around. Right, so I'm joined by Andrew and John, who are outside St James's Park now with the signs in the hand, as you can see. There is a silent protest going on outside St James's Park. This is NUFC Against Sportswashing, which is what, if I just zoom out a little bit there, this is what these guys are here to represent with a silent protest. So I'm just curious to get their side of things. So guys, firstly, can I just ask you, why are you doing this today?
Really a case, this is the point where we've got organised enough to do it, really, isn't it? And it's a good opportunity. Last game before the World Cup starts in Qatar seemed like good timing to us as well.
Firstly, I think as football fans, we don't have any say in who takes over our football club. All we want as football fans is to get an ambitious owner, and we know how the Premier League is financially now. The Saudis, it's very fair to say, have stakes in lots of different companies. Across the board, and I'd be interested to just get your opinion on that. Whether you also have a strong protest against the likes of Disney, against the likes of, right? I'm just asking these questions which other fans would ask. So I'm getting a smile from you there.
Yeah, well, Andrew can answer it, but
first of all, you say we don't have any say. I mean, Saudi Arabia, if you send some hostile tweets to them, you can get locked up for 40 years. That's how they respond to a few tweets. So what if everybody protested against them, all Newcastle fans did? What would they do? How would they respond to that? I think they'd leave.
Question that I'm asking, were you as passionate, and I'm sure you're in the knowledge that obviously our government has worked with Saudi Arabia in the past, were you as passionate about this when you found that out?
I do not approve of anything the government does, but this is something I can directly impact by protesting as a Newcastle fan.
For me, I mean,
the thing I don't like at all is the feeling of being used. They're using us to project a positive image of themselves. So when you go along and you just participate, you stay quiet, you're sort of acquiescing to that, you're being a part of that. And I don't want anything to do with that.
I think it's fair to say, though, that's another statement that's quite a blasé statement, because I don't think you're saying they're using us. You're not really. I don't think there's enough evidence to prove. That's just your opinion. It's not fact.
If you look at the kit we're wearing now, I mean, are you saying there's no connection there between ourselves and Saudi Arabia?
I'm not saying that at all, but you're saying they're using us. For me, I think these owners are going to be here for a very, very, very long time.
Right.
There is not one Newcastle fan, I don't think, who agrees with what goes on in Saudi Arabia. Not one Newcastle fan. Yes, yeah, because we are good people. We are one of the nicest bunches of people in the world. But we cannot affect, again, going back to what I said, who takes over our football club. We just want, by us being happy that our owners now are investing in Newcastle women, by the fact we are investing in players, we are building a team to be proud of, we cannot affect what goes on in that country. We don't agree with it.
Can I ask you, did you campaign for the takeover?
Sorry?
Did you campaign for the takeover, even though you didn't think you could affect who owns it?
What do you mean, did I campaign?
It was a big campaign. There was 100,000 people signed a petition in favour of the takeover. I mean,
yes, I did.
So you must have thought that you could have an effect then. Why do you think you can't have any say now?
Because what's going on in Saudi Arabia will continue whether they own our football club or not. And going back to what I keep repeating, we are just looking for a football club to be as ambitious as what we are as fans. I'll throw you one more scenario. So say the Saudis left this football club tomorrow. Does that change what's going on in Saudi Arabia?
I think if you turn your back on Saudi investments, it's harder for them to come into the West. But the main thing for me is this feeling of being used. I hate that. Well, I don't want anything.
It's interesting. When I've asked you that question, you haven't convinced me in your answer of yes, that would affect what goes on in Saudi Arabia. Like that's just me observing your body language there.
I don't know if it would or if it wouldn't. It probably wouldn't have an enormous impact, but it's the way we're being manipulated that I dislike, and that's the main thing for me.
And do you still watch Newcastle games?
I've watched them, but I haven't been as enthusiastic. I had a season ticket for 30 years. I'm not going anymore. So.
Would that not be a little bit contradicting the fact that you said you're still watching them here and there?
Not really. I think you can watch the TV, can't you?
I had to cut that interview short. You know, I'm a very passionate Newcastle fan, and I didn't agree going into that interview with what they were doing. Do I feel like what's happening in Saudi Arabia is okay? Of course not. And if any Newcastle fan watching this, we are some of the loveliest people in the world, but if any Newcastle fan watching this does agree with how Saudi Arabia deal with things in their country, then I'd suggest whacking the unsubscribe button. I don't think that is the case for any Newcastle fan. But my question to them, if you noticed in that interview, the main question was, how does Newcastle United not being owned by the Saudis, how does that change what happens in that country? And they couldn't give me an answer. I heard that some of them, one of the gentlemen told me he still watches games from time to time. Very hypocritical in my opinion, very contradicting. The gentleman who runs the organisation I thought was very rude in some of my questions. He wouldn't let me get a word in. He took the hump with some of my questions, which I did warn him before we started chatting that I didn't agree with what they were doing. And I had some questions speaking on behalf of a lot of our fan base. And he didn't like it. He really didn't like it. And that was part of the reason I wanted to cut that interview short. Lots of talk about what is happening in the country, and maybe that's why they are here, to spread the awareness of that. He asked me a couple of questions whether I was in favour of this takeover. But as I said to them, I'm a very passionate Newcastle fan. Politics and football, in my opinion, should not be mixed. We have been taken over by owners. We have no say in who takes over our football club. These owners have invested in the team. I've got no doubt that you're going to invest in the city. They've invested in the academy. That's all we can ask for as football fans. I don't want to be taking my son in the future. I don't have kids at the moment, but taking my son to the match in the future, talking about politics and all of this stuff. All we've ever wanted is a football club that matches our ambition, and that's what we've got. And yes, what's going on in Saudi Arabia is a very controversial topic around the world. But Saudi Arabia also deal with large organisations, your Disneys, our government in the past, huge companies which I mentioned to them. And to say that we shouldn't support our football club because we've been taken over by these, I just think it's ridiculous. And I got really frustrated in that interview because they didn't have the answers I maybe expected them to. And I question some of them people, if I'm being totally honest with you, stood there, how big a Newcastle fans they are, whether this just allows them to talk about something that they don't like, something they feel very strongly about, which is Saudi Arabia. So they're using a football club because they know it gets in the Daily Mail. I don't know. Please let us know your thoughts in the comments, Newcastle fans, on this. It's a very controversial topic. Over a year since we were taken over, and they waited till now, which is another debate. Apparently it was related to that Chelsea game that we played last year, but hey, I don't see enough of a relation there to do it now, just before the World Cup. Let us know your thoughts, and if you've lasted this long, whack that like, give us a subscribe, and I'll touch it down on the next video. But yeah, I just wanted to get amongst it and ask them some questions rather than sitting on the fence from the majority of our fan base. So I hope you've liked this video, and I'll see you on the next one. Away the lads.